The latest smartphone sales figures have been released, and it's not a pretty picture. Overall, smartphone sales have been declining for well over a year now, and the market is changing. Big players like Apple and Samsung have seen declines in sales, and LG, wow, it's not looking great for them. Samsung down 8% year over year. Apple down 20% year over year. Xiaomi, Lenovo, Alcatel, and the rest of the market all down big numbers. But for Huawei, let's just say the executives in the mobile division are in for a pretty big bonus this year. Smartphone sales at Huawei, on the backdrop of a very tough, declining, increasingly commoditized market, are up 50%. Why? Well, if this trend continues, Huawei are going to take their place as the #1 smartphone vendor in the whole world very shortly. Living in China and seeing these numbers literally play out right in front of my eyes, I can at least give some reasons behind the numbers. It starts perhaps unsurprisingly with iPhone, which for years has been one of the most desirable consumer products in mainland China. The iPhone was and still is one of the best phones on the market, and for a good few years enjoyed incredible success in mainland China. Of course, you have to give Apple credit for creating a high-class, desirable product and essentially creating the modern smartphone as we know it today. So why are smartphone sales slumping? Well, smartphone sales are tough across the board, but a big influence is local, regional players who are now very competitive, whereas a few years back, they just weren't. If you take the P30 Pro from Huawei, for example, whether you like this phone or not compared to the iPhone or the Samsung Galaxy S10 series is now quite subjective. The S10 might be better in some aspects, the iPhone in others, and that goes for the P30 too. But what is harder to argue is just the quality of the device in terms of the hardware, the build quality, the screen, the cameras, and even the in-house Huawei designed chip is at least comparable to the iPhone and the S10. Whereas even just a few years ago, that just wasn't the case. If you go back 4 or even just 3 years in time, those comparisons were less likely. In fact, if you go back to last year, the Mate 20 from Huawei often won the award for the best smartphone camera for stills photography. And they're even going toe-to-toe with Samsung at the bleeding edge of the industry, for example, with foldable smartphones. And in mainland China anyway, these products, comparable to the iPhone and the Samsung, are anywhere from 20 to 35% cheaper than their foreign counterparts. Before, Huawei devices were not as good, but cheaper. Now they are just as good, but cheaper. Not to mention Huawei's incredible ability to be able to sell expensive flagship devices for 5,500, even up to almost 7,000 RMB for the fully decked out models, right next door to low-end budget phones that don't even cost 1,000 RMB. I've used that smartphone. It's pretty good. And on top of that, Huawei have had unbelievable success with the Honor brand, not just in mainland China, but across Southeast Asia, which really is the only growth area in the market. Honor phones will usually have lower price points. Whilst Apple has to do with selling phones like the iPhone XR, of its own a very capable, very powerful, incredible smartphone, it doesn't fill people with that sense of excitement and thrill like the more expensive iPhones do, or did. And if you are, according to the statistics, one of those people in emerging markets that is not part of and not really interested in becoming part of the Apple ecosystem, then a slightly cheaper but still very expensive iPhone won't appeal to you. That's proven by the fact that Apple, a company that does not discount its products, in mainland China this year has discounted its products. The iPhone XR has to fit in to the rigid iPhone structure. It has to be cheaper than its more expensive counterparts, and by definition has to literally appear worse than them. With the Honor brand, Huawei doesn't have that problem. Huawei can take some slightly older components from its previous year's flagships and put them inside a brand new device with a modern, fresh design and some unique features of its own. There just simply isn't much growth at the top end of the market as per the recent figures. The growth is in emerging markets, hence why you see Huawei and BBK, which owns Oppo and Vivo, all doing well according to the recent figures. Their mid to budget end phones often have compelling and novel features, for example, pop-up cameras, bezel-less displays, good cameras, big batteries, and for one reason or another, those companies just seem to be doing all the right things in those markets. So whatever you think of Huawei and whether you like the phones or not, it can't be denied that Huawei are obviously making a lot of the right decisions in the current smartphone market. Anyway, I'd like to know what you think of all of this, so hit the like button if you like the video, even if you don't agree with it, and let me know what you think in the comments.